Hi, good afternoon. I'm Erin Erickson, co-host and co-founder of Mom Enough, and I'm super excited to bring this very first episode of Mom Enough Live here to you on Facebook. We're going to be talking about surviving these last few weeks of homeschooling, and this is really just a crazy time, unprecedented. And I'm super excited to have our guest from Yup, which is the awesome math tutoring app that my kids love to use. And I love it because it takes me out of the math teaching role, which, I love math and did a lot of it growing up. I'm not so great at helping the kids with it anymore. So we leave that to Yup. But our guest here today is Kreg Moccia from Yup, and I'm going to have Kreg tell you a little bit about himself. Thanks so much for joining us, Kreg, and thank you for tuning into this live. Woo!
Yeah, thank you for having me. It was exciting. It did a little countdown: 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and it's live.
Yeah, here we go.
Yeah, this is really great. Thank you for having me. Yeah, again, my name is Kreg Moccia. I am the director of academics at Yup. We provide remote tutoring services for kids all around the world, and we are a service that makes sure that your kids understand the math for the long term. We focus on conceptual understanding so that they really get it down the line and can be successful, for the rest of their lives with math, and that's what we do.
Well, that is so awesome, and I can't say enough good things about Yup, and my kids love it. My daughter was a little hesitant when I first told her about it. She's like, "I don't know, Mom." And then the next day, she's like, "Oh my gosh, Mom, this was amazing. I was on the app for like an hour, and I completely learned this thing I couldn't understand." And she did so well in math this year, and a big part of that was just having that extra boost at home. So
Excellent.
I love it. And I mean, they don't teach math the same way today that they did when my kids were growing up. And so I'll try to oh, this is how you do it. You just do this here and carry this. And they're like, what? That is not what we do at all. So I'm at a loss. It's great to have the, skilled teachers at Yup to help out where I can't be helpful. But you also, in addition to your amazing work with Yup, you are really an expert when it comes to learning. And so I want to tap into your expertise today.
Awesome.
I guess we'll just start out with how can families kind of set their children up for remote learning success?
Yeah, it's because I'm assuming it's quite difficult during these times with the kids at home. Everyone's at home. Everyone's trying to do their thing, and learning in an unstructured environment is so different than being in a school setting. And I think it comes down to how do we motivate or stay motivated in this different environment that's so different. And so I think of it in a few ways. I'd start with what is the big picture of why students are doing what they're doing at home? What are their goals? And I think that zooms out to 5 years from now, 10 years from now. What is it that kids want to be doing, or your kids want to be doing? And they are going to be sometime down the line having their own careers or in college, where their environment is as unstructured as this, where no one is telling them what to do each moment of the day. And so I think that one thing parents can do for their students right now is, while this is a difficult time, reframe it as a learning opportunity or a practice opportunity for the future when students won't be getting that much direction for how to spend their time. And so that is one thing that families can do for their students to sort of ground in the why of continuing to do your schoolwork and continuing to be productive. From there, you could sort of backtrack to even shorter term goals. I'm thinking, Erin, a year from now, what do you want to have accomplished when, hopefully we're out of this tricky situation and you're back at school? Do you want to be, better at that sport that you didn't really have the chance to practice with your team? Better at that instrument that you want to play, or still getting a good grade in that class that you've always struggled with? Where do you want to be a year from now? So I think one of the biggest things is tracking with your student. Where do you want to be in the long term? What's that going to look like a year from now? And trying to really zoom that back in on, this week, what are the types of habits that you want to feel successful with, that you want to sort of lock in on? And how are you going to make that happen given your schedule? How can you set it up in a way where you can be successful with that. Does that make sense?
Oh, I love that. It makes perfect sense. And really, that's a great tip for anybody. I mean, even for us adults, like, where do we want to be in a year? Where do we want to be in 5 years? And what do we need
Right.
today to make that happen? So you're like a self-help expert, even for adults.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same stuff. It's funny. I think that a lot of the time we think that we have to break it down to be so simple for kids, or we really need to tell them what to do, of like, you have to do your homework at this time, or you got to get these grades. When really what inspires kids is the same thing that inspires the rest of us. It is the big picture. It's tapping into that. Who do you want to be? Or even who do you want to be like? Who are the people that you admire in history, in the world, or in your family, and what's it going to look like to become that type of person someday? And then, yeah, it's zooming it back into like, what does that mean for this morning? How do you connect that? And that's the point where I think parents can come in and help to set a schedule that taps into those habits and those weekly goals that I was saying that are going to get you to that big picture in the long run. And I think there's a lot of like useful strategies that you can employ with your kids on a daily basis to tap into that bigger picture to get them to where they want to be.
Yeah. Well, it's funny that you said this morning, because I'm like, if we're going to assess where we're going to be in a year based on this morning, we're in a lot of trouble at my house. Like, everything sort of like went crazy here this morning. There are like all these moving pieces, and we've been doing a pretty decent job of holding it all together.
Yeah.
All of a sudden this morning, it was like, oh my gosh, everything like fell apart. So I think we're gonna start tomorrow with these habits. So tell me a little bit about what these habits look like.
Of course. Yeah, I think there's an important point just based on what you said too of taking some time to have that self-compassion and sort of even just like lowering your expectations for each other a little bit when things go wrong, and just saying, you know what, like, this morning was not our best. I love what you just said. Let's start tomorrow fresh and do it again. That is exactly the mindset that it takes, to make things like this work and to adapt to these kind of changes in routine and habits. And so I just love hearing you talk about it and seeing you even like just say, okay, we'll do that tomorrow. I think that, and that's one of the habits you can have is reflecting. I think even just as a family, whether it's on a weekly basis, whether it's a quick 5-minute check-in, that's even if it's at breakfast, and you ask that question of like, yesterday was kind of stressful. What do we want to do a little differently today to make this go better? And let the kids talk and see what they say. Why do they think it didn't go well? And I think you were saying earlier, there's a computer out here, and my son's going to probably come grab it at some point. And it's like, okay, where do we all put our stuff each day, so that it's where we know it's going to be. And
I'm on my porch, and I tell my family, hey, I'm going to be doing this Facebook Live thing, so everybody please be quiet. Want some verbal acknowledgement that you understand this. And while I'm sitting here talking and listening to you, I see someone has come to the side of the house and is waving to me from outside. That's so clearly we need to set some clear boundaries for my family.
Totally. It's so funny.
Yeah. So are there some specific like day-to-day habits that you would recommend people establish?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there are a number of things that you can do. So one is to set a schedule. I know it sounds simple and everyone says it, but set a schedule I would do it for the week in advance, but if not for the week, then just do it for the day. What is today going to look like for each person in your family? This is why I recommend maybe doing it all together at that one moment where you have free time. And therefore you can say, if this is what the day looks like, block it out. Everyone take 2 minutes, just write what you're doing, when and where. And then at the end, I would have everyone share, what is your day looking like? And that's where someone's going to say, oh no, I was planning on being in this room at this time to do this thing. And that's where mom could say, oh no, I have a Facebook Live podcast outside at this time. And everyone could say, oh, okay, I won't come out and wave at you, or maybe I will come out and wave at you just because I think it's funny. So I think that is one thing, is setting a schedule and keeping in mind those things of when am I productive the most? What is my workspace going to look like? How am I going to avoid distractions? And I think having as part of that schedule, planning in things like rest time, planning in when you're going to eat, planning in when you're going to socialize. If your kids, they do need to talk to their friends and have those interactions, but they also need to get their homework done. Or they might have, some schools are doing learning where it's happening at set times of day. Some schools are doing learning where you watch the video whenever you want, but there's like teacher office hours where you can go and ask questions. So I think it's going to vary widely depending on what each student needs. So setting a schedule is the number one habit that I would say kids can get into pretty quickly that will help with some of the things that you're saying.
Yeah, that's so important. I know one of our greatest challenges has been managing use of technology, because outside of the synchronous or asynchronous learning times, there's like a lot of time that's unstructured, as you mentioned. And because technology is how the kids are connecting with their friends these days, it's kind of like they're on technology even more than they need to be. So I love this idea that you propose of really even saying like, this is the time I'm going to do some social stuff. So maybe that's a video game where you can chat with your friends while you're playing a video game, but that you're also coming up with other things to do, like getting outside now that it's sunny and nice. And
exactly.
Yeah. Although where you live, it's pretty nice year round. So where we live, we go outside year round. There's no bad weather, just bad clothes. But when it's sunny and nice,
I've never heard that saying before.
Yeah, yes. In Minnesota, it's like you can't. You would be inside half the year if you were afraid to go outside in bad weather. So, but now it's beautiful. Like there's no excuse not to be outside, and so I would just plug for getting kids outside and away from their technology as much as possible, because they are going to be using technology a lot more right now, because that's how we're staying connected with school. And
absolutely.
Yeah. So how do you recommend kind of helping kids stay organized? So one of our biggest challenges is just outside of just like the physical, or the time schedule, are there other things that you think kids could do to kind of keep some of their schoolwork organized? I just worry that, there's a lot of moving pieces, and it's not like you're necessarily connecting with the teacher, once a day or every other day if you're on a block. And so there isn't that kind of verbal, like, hey, don't forget, turn in this at blah, 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 How do you recommend kids kind of stay on top of their work and physically get organized?
I highly recommend a physical planner. So a physical book that has, a calendar on it and spaces for to-do lists. A lot of schools give these out to their students. And I used this when I was in high school, when I was teaching high school, and when I was a dean at a high school in Brooklyn. We harped on this so much, is just having a physical thing with you where you keep track of everything that you do. And it could be a planner. Some people prefer to go electronic. So now as an adult, I do it electronically. I use a combination of Google Docs and Google Calendar to keep everything in one place. But a planner is huge. Having a to-do list, whether that's, an actual list that you're just continuing to add on to, like every time something is given to you. I think the planner helps so that you can put it into different due dates, depending on when things are due. And I think the key to making that live is having the set times for reflection. So having a daily time, I recommend at the start and at the end of the day, 5-10 minutes. You could do this as a family, or just try to get your kids to do it on their own, where they review their planner and they look back and say, what are all the things that so if it's at the end of the day, it's what are all the things that I did today? What's every class I had? What's every piece of paper I read? Like take it all out, put it out on the table. What are the action items or to-dos that are coming from this? And write them into the planner, right? Well, they're not going to be papers at this point, right? Because they're mostly going to be online. But it might be that you click through the online syllabi or the assignments that were given to you and say, okay, what are the new due dates or tests or whatever at the end of the day? And just make sure that you've gone through your whole calendar from the day everything you did, and record it in the planner. And then when you get up the next day, you're looking at that planner and saying, what are all the things that are in here that I'm supposed to do today? And then you do that daily time blocking. So just having something physical in front of you and making sure you put a set aside time to actually review it, make sure you're capturing everything, I think is hugely important.
That is such a great suggestion. And I do think in the digital age, we've really kind of lost sight of the importance of analog and how writing, even like writing cursive versus printing is there's a different processing mechanism in the brain. So writing things on paper versus typing them is also a different brain process. And so there's really a lot to support some level of going analog. And well, I'll actually put a link in this to a recent episode of Mom Enough where we interviewed Ryder Carroll, the author of the bullet journal and the inventor of the bullet journal method.
Oh, very cool.
I think that method, I think it can work really well for anyone, whether you are really artistic and want to make it like super cool and beautiful, or you're just looking for a really fast way to record tasks or record events. And it's a really adaptable and personalized kind of system that you create. And I really love that method. And my kids and I all enjoy using that as a way to kind of create our own systems. But for kids who maybe it's too much to create their own system, there are so many options out there, but I'll link to that. And but I love everything you're sharing, and I'm taking notes because I think a lot of what you're sharing is really important for all of us right now. And I would just add, just to take a deep breath. So I had this crazy morning and to just take a couple seconds to just breathe and tell yourself, you've got this, you're going to figure this out. It's all manageable. And the best piece of advice anyone ever gave me, it was a very difficult time when I was in graduate school and I was really sick and just it was so much on my plate and I had the kids were little. And one of my professors said, all you need to tell yourself every day is you'll manage things as they come. And that just put me at ease because it gives you that perspective of you don't have to, you might have all these papers laying in front of you. You write them down and then you can literally and figuratively put them down. So you're not carrying it all at one time because you can't manage it all at once. It can be really overwhelming when you think of everything you have to do at one time. Absolutely. And so I love, writing it down and putting it down and then reminding yourself that you'll manage things as they come.
Yeah. I also liked what you just said about take a deep breath. That seems so simple, but there's so much research out there now that talks about actually the impact of even just breathing on your brain and to calm yourself down. And if you actually just take 4 or 5 deep breaths in moments where you're overwhelmed, it deactivates certain parts of the brain that make you more, emotional and on edge and things like that. And it reactivates the parts of your brain that allow you to think and rationalize. And so, the growing movement of mindfulness is something that I find really fascinating, of finding ways to connect with the present moment, especially when you are overwhelmed, but also when you're feeling fine. And something you said earlier about getting outside, getting into nature, taking deep breaths in moments where you're feeling like that, taking deep breaths in moments where you're feeling fine. These are just practices that are really shown to readjust our frame of mind, calm us down when we're overwhelmed, and get us to, just calm down a little bit. And so these are things that I highly recommend, even working into that schedule that we were talking about earlier. Set aside time, like you said, to get outside. Set aside time to just take a few deep breaths.
I love that. And I'm so glad you brought up the physiologic aspect of this, because when we are in that stress state, it decreases the activity in the prefrontal cortex, which is the executive functioning part of the brain. So that's the part of the brain that allows you to make decisions and to think things through. And that's why when we go to take a test and we're stressed, we can't remember the answers because our brain isn't functioning optimally. And I always tell people, they're like, well, why does our brain do that? That doesn't make any sense. Well, it makes perfect sense because our brain does that to protect us. But it's just that when we're taking a test and we're perceiving that as like a potential harm, it's not. So it's kind of like, so the amygdala is the part of the brain that detects those threats, and it's kind of like an amygdala fail. So
Yeah.
like, I mean, if you're going to go walk across a busy street and a car comes by that you didn't see, if that didn't happen, if your brain didn't like stop the executive functioning part and just let you lead with reaction, you would get hurt. And so it's the fact that our brain does that, that we just react. If it didn't do that, we would be like, oh, should I go to the right or should I go to the left? And whew, that would be it.
I love that analogy.
Yeah. So it's like, it works really well when it's working well, but when we're having that kind of stress response to, say, a math assignment or a history paper or on an exam, it's not helping us. And that's where using those techniques, like you mentioned, getting outside, taking some deep breaths, thinking of a happy place, that can really help get that prefrontal cortex operating again so we can
absolutely
fully use our brain. So speaking of using our brains, let's talk a little bit about YUP and kind of how YUP fits into the picture, and let's focus a little bit on math learning. So let's maybe like focus in on, what does this virtual or remote school situation mean for math learning? Let's start there.
That's a great question. I think I'm hearing that it's difficult for educators, for families, to do the remote learning with math. A lot of the problems we're hearing people are running into is, usually you're in the classroom with students, you can see what they're working on when they're working on it, you can give them feedback right away and sort of course correct with them if they're struggling. Now, students are doing a lot of that work on their own, the teacher can't see it, there's fewer assignments, fewer and far between, and a lot of these schools are moving towards just looking at the mastery, like did they actually get down what they were supposed to? And so it's hard for kids to get feedback, I think, when they're learning remotely, when they're not actually in person with the teacher, without the technology allowing for that quick, like, here's where I'm at, here's what I'm struggling with, oh, okay, change this, change that. And I think a lot of families are feeling that tension with remote learning. I think that it sort of goes back to even what I was saying with remote learning in general around how to help kids with it. Thinking of those long-term goals, always grounding it in the why of what you're doing. Do you want to go to college, you want to do well on the SAT, but you also want to have access to math opportunities, STEM opportunities, different career paths that'll make you happy later on in life. So you want to do this long-term math learning. And what we're really about at YUP is long-term math learning. And I think most kids' intuition and parents is to try to finish the homework now, or finish the problem that they're working on now, or work towards that test that is coming, a day or two from now. And what are the habits that promote the longer term learning is the big question. So like we were saying earlier, for remote learning, who do you want to be 5-10 years from now? What do you want to accomplish by the end of this year? What are the habits that'll get you there? How do you set the goals and follow those habits? Same thing with math. You're not just doing this to get this assignment done today or by the end of the week. You really want to set yourself up to know the math a year or two from now. Even if you can't get the help of the teacher or aren't getting the feedback, you got to know how to do this stuff when you get to college, or when you are taking the SAT a year from now. I think the thing that's a struggle for many schools is they're just trying to get kids to do the work from home. And I think it's going to be a kind of a critical, a rude awakening when some of these longer term test scores come back, or when students take the SAT a year from now and they realize, like, oh, I am more behind than I thought. And it's going to mean that I have to take an extra class when I get to college, or I'm not as competitive for that college that I thought I was going to be. These are some of the things that I think are not as top of mind for people, but a lot of schools are worried about. And so I think that for for making sure that those things are happening, it's finding ways to promote long-term learning with kids. And so that comes back to what are the habits that are going to get you to learn math for the long term and not just get you through this assignment for today or get the problems done in your homework that you're submitting to your teacher remotely now. It's really thinking through what those habits are. And at YUP, our tutors are experts essentially in building those habits with kids in every session where they submit a problem. And so that's where our focus is. And I think that for any student, it's trying to learn the concepts. So if right now you're remote learning, trying not just to get the assignment done, but to really ask yourself if you understand that concept. If you're watching the videos from your teacher, if there are videos, trying to make sure that you understand the definitions or understand the deeper why behind what you're doing, and not just like memorizing the steps or trying to get to the answer. These are some of the things that are gonna help in the long run.
So that's fantastic and super helpful. I'm sure a lot of people who are tuning in might not know exactly like how does that remote, like any 24/7 access to a math tutor, what does that look like? Because I mean, when we first signed up for YUP last fall, I wasn't using it personally, so I didn't really know exactly how it worked until the kids started using it, and then I could get a sense of how it plays out. But could you just tell us a little bit about what does it look like and how does it work?
Absolutely. Well, all of the features of the service are set up to support that idea of long-term learning. So there's, the app is available 24/7, which, because we know that students are working on problems at all times of day, especially now with a remote learning environment. And so they need that help on demand when they're stuck, and not just at a weekly set time where they get to access a tutor, because that learning is happening every day. We're building those habits for long-term success every single day. So 24/7 access. Students snap a picture of any problem that they want on the app, and it connects them with a tutor who they connect with via text message within our app, and they use live tools like a whiteboard. Our tutors use concept cards to get across some of the core definitions and concepts to kids. Kids can share images as they go, so they can share their work as they're putting it down on paper by just snapping pictures of it. And what this allows students to do is understand those concepts real time while they're working on the problems. There is no session length, so students get unlimited access, because really students come in at different places. They could be stuck and haven't even started the problem, have no idea what the teacher was talking about in class. And if that's the case, a session to do a problem or two might take an hour. Like you said, when your daughter was completely stuck on something. Or they might just be 90% of the way through the problem, they're stuck on one step, they don't understand this little aspect of it, and that might take 20 minutes to get through with the tutor. So we have this unlimited access to really meet kids where they're at, depending on what they need. Erin, for some reason I can't hear you.
I'm muted.
Oh.
A few minutes ago, as you were talking, a big truck was coming by. I muted. I forgot. Wow. So that's my first Facebook Live fail. It's a learning experience for sure. So that makes it so helpful to hear you kind of like talk about how that works, and it's so cool. I love how technology is changing so rapidly to help kids learn and to help all of us function in new and creative ways. And I feel like YUP is really like a disruptive innovator when it comes to tutoring, and it's pretty cool to see that. So as a learning expert, I'd love to know what kind of last words of wisdom you have for all of us parents and kids to kind of get through these last few weeks and kind of look ahead to next year.
Oh, wow. I would say what I said earlier when you said you were having a bad morning, which is give yourself a break. Don't be so hard on yourself. These really are some crazy times. There's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of stress. And I know that everyone listening to this episode has a deep desire to be the best parent that they can be. and it's one of the most, if not the most important thing in their lives. And so I think when you're put in this new situation, you want to do well, you want to do right by your kids, you want to make sure they're not falling behind. At the same time, you have your own life going on, and people are trying to adapt to working from home. And so I would just say, go easy on yourself, have that self-compassion, take moments to recognize that you're doing a good job, even when it really just seems like you're not, or like everything is going wrong, or whatever else, because we will all get through this. And I just think, yeah, take those moments to recognize how crazy of a situation this is and how well you're really doing, and recognize the strengths and the things that are going well. Tell your kids the things that they are doing well and the strengths that they have. Tell your partner or whoever you're getting through this with that they are doing well and why, and just tell yourself that as well, because these really are crazy times, and we've got to have that self-compassion to get through them.
Oh, that is so fantastic, Kreg, and I'm just so glad you brought that up, because really that compassion is essential to every part of life in general. And at Mom Enough, we really believe in the importance of, you don't have to be mom perfect, you don't have to be dad perfect, you don't have to be teacher perfect for the educators that might be tuning in. It's you just have to be enough, and every day that's going to look a little different. I always tell my patients and my one-on-one coaching clients that I believe in sum total parenting, and it's really not about what that one day looked like or that one morning. It's really about the sum total of everything that happened. And I think it's just really important to kind of focus in on, what do you want the big picture to look like? And it kind of like what you said, what do you want that future, coming right back to the beginning, what do you want that future to look like? And bringing it back to the moment. But it's, we're all going to have, as parents and teachers and, grandparents, people who care about children, we're all going to have those moments where we're maybe like enabling our kids and doing too much for them, or moments where we're doing too much of our own thing, we're mom too little, or we're mom too much. And it's about just being mom enough every day, like doing the best you can, but having that compassion and knowing that, as you said, that there's always tomorrow and there's always another opportunity. And with great partners like Yup, and of course all of the other supporting partners of Mom Enough, we just feel so grateful to have this community of organizations that are invested in making children's and families' lives better. And I'm just so grateful that you could join me today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's been so great. I love what you're doing, and I think you just have a super talented team of wonderful people, and it's been such a joy to get to know you. Yeah. And also, I really admire you. At one of our earlier conversations, I learned that Kreg did the Appalachian Trail by himself,
Yeah.
and so he's kind of my new idol when it comes to all that stuff. So thank you so much for joining us, and thanks to Yup for being a supporting partner of Mom Enough, and thank you to all of you for tuning in today. It was awesome, and have a great day.